Hey everyone. As we wind down tonight, we're heading back to ancient Egypt, not to visit the grand pyramids or decipher mysterious hieroglyphs, but for something far more crusty. You're waking up in the sandy haze of 1300 BCE Thebes, not as a pharaoh or scribe, but as a humble baker. Yes, tonight's sleepy adventure is about your daily grind, literally. You squint into the dawn light, already warm and golden as it filters through your reed shutters. The Nile glistens in the distance, lazily curling like a cat stretching its spine. You don't have time to admire it, though. Your back's already sore from sleeping on woven mats, and there's a queue of half-mythical customers expecting bread before the second rooster crow. You probably won't survive this. Still, your job's important. Bread in Egypt isn't just food. It's wages, offerings, social status, and sometimes even spiritual protection. The economy runs on loaves, not coins. Your crusty creations will travel from the local market to the high temple, from peasants' huts to royal banquets, all within a single day's work. And if they get too crusty, well, let's just say that no one wants to anger a minor grain deity before lunchtime. So, before you settle in, feel free to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you're truly enjoying the journey. And hey, drop your location and what time it is for you down in the comments. Let's see who else is up late, dreaming of flour and pharaohs. Now, soften the glow, set a gentle breeze in motion, and let's drift into tonight's tale together. You're already outside, brushing the sand from your tunic. Not that it matters. There's sand in everything. In your sandals, in your hair, definitely in your bread. The joke around town is that you haven't eaten a real meal until your teeth crunch a little. And you suspect that joke wasn't even funny 3 centuries ago. Your workshop is a modest space, just mud brick walls, a low clay oven shaped like a bloated beehive, and piles of amphorae filled with emmer wheat and barley. A couple of goats glance at you through the open door, chewing as if they too are waiting for breakfast. The first order of business? Lighting the fire. You crouch beside the oven and rub kindling together with half-closed eyes. It's a rhythm you've done so many times, your body moves without you thinking. Eventually, smoke curls upward in lazy ribbons, like it too hasn't had coffee yet. Historians still argue whether these ovens were mostly used outdoors or sheltered inside bakeries, but one thing they all agree on: they got hot. Like scar your forearms if you're not careful, hot. They could bake dozens of loaves an hour when the fire was strong. And you, lucky you, are expected to keep up that pace all day. Once the fire is going, it's time to get the flour. You dig your hand into a clay jar and pull up a scoop of emmer wheat. It's dusty, coarse, and smells faintly of sweet hay. This isn't the soft, modern flour you'd find in a supermarket. This is ancient grain, hulled and temperamental. Before you can grind it, you need to sort through the day's wheat delivery. There's always a chance some industrious little scarab beetles hitchhiked in, and you don't want beetle bread again. Not after what happened last time. That priest at the Temple of Mut had questions. You did not have answers. Sorting done, you lug the sacks toward the grinding station. Your grandmother's old slab and handstone, still smooth in the middle from decades of use. She used to sit for hours, back hunched, arms moving in a steady push-pull over the stone like some kind of sleep-deprived metronome. Now it's your turn. You kneel beside the slab, brace your calloused hands, and begin. The sound of stone against stone is as soothing as it is exhausting. Scrape, grind, scrape, grind. You'll be at this for a while. The wheat doesn't become flour as much as it becomes less wheat. You remember her stories, murmured in the early morning, tales of baking competitions during the festival of Opet, of secret spice blends smuggled from Nubia, of that time she saw a loaf that looked exactly like Pharaoh Horemheb's nose. That one won a prize, probably because no one dared eat it. Midway through grinding, your cousin drops by. He's supposed to be helping, but you know he's only here for the gossip. He offers you a fig, casually leans against the doorway, and begins his daily tirade about the corrupt flour inspector down at the granary. Apparently, yesterday's wheat was half sand and still passed. You make a mental note to sift twice today. Speaking of sifting, once your flour's ground, it's time to try and get some of that grit out. Spoiler alert, it's mostly impossible. But you use a reed-woven sieve anyway, jiggling the flour through in soft clouds of pale dust. You hum a little tune to pass the time, something your grandmother used to sing, equal parts lullaby and warning about snakes in the pantry. It's almost relaxing, until your neighbor's goose honks directly behind you and makes you throw the sieve in the air. You glare at the goose. The goose glares back. Neither of you apologizes. Classic. You gather the fallen flour with a sigh, whispering a half-hearted blessing to Khnum, god of creation. Historians still debate whether Khnum was specifically invoked by bakers or just clay potters, but you figure it can't hurt. He's got strong hands and a gentle beard. Seems like a flour-friendly deity. The fire is now roaring. You glance at the rising smoke and stretch your arms overhead. You've got a full day ahead, kneading, shaping, baking, cooling, and delivering. But for now, you've ground your first batch of grain. Your tunic is white with flour. Your eyes sting from smoke. But your heart is calm. After all, this is bread making in ancient Egypt. It's not glamorous, it's not easy, but it's yours. And maybe, just maybe, today's loaves won't be too crusty. The grinding's done, your arms feel like boiled reeds, and your nostrils are full of flour dust. You wipe your face on your tunic, which at this point is really just a moving dust rag with opinions. It's time to get serious, because no flour means no dough, and no dough means no bread. And no bread means the temple priests start eyeing your goats suspiciously. Today, you're grinding emmer wheat again. You always are. It's the staple grain of ancient Egypt, coarse and stubborn like the bread inspector's beard. But you've gotten used to it. It's not soft like modern wheat. It has husks that cling tighter than your aunt's bad advice. You've learned to soak it a little overnight, just enough to keep the stones from overheating. A trick your grandmother swore by. That, and keeping a garlic clove in your sandal for good luck. You're not sure it works, but hey, your left foot smells terrific. You settle in beside the old grinding slab, the same one your family has used for 3 generations. Made of basalt and worn smooth in the center, it feels familiar under your palms. The handheld quern fits your grip like it was made for you, though it absolutely wasn't. It was made by your great-uncle, who also once tried to invent a loaf shaped like the Sphinx. It collapsed, twice, into the Nile. The fish didn't even eat it. Back and forth, back and forth. The rhythmic scraping is almost meditative, though your shoulders disagree. You push, pull, lean in, and the wheat slowly, reluctantly, becomes something like flour. The trick is pressure without haste. Too fast, and the grain leaps free like tiny screaming projectiles. Too slow, and you'll still be at this when Ra drives his solar boat into tomorrow. Outside, You can hear the city waking. Donkeys bray, sandals shuffle along the alley. Someone curses the morning geese. Again. You wonder if the goose from earlier is staging a coup. You wouldn't be surprised. Geese in Egypt are organized. Your younger cousin, barely out of boyhood, ambles in with a yawn and a splinter in his toe. He offers no help, but plenty of commentary. "Did you hear about Bakari?" he asks, casually picking a fig from the windowsill. You grunt in response, focused on not grinding your knuckles into the basalt. "He got caught putting gypsum in the flour," he says. You stop mid-grind. "Gypsum?" "Yeah," said it made the loaves look bigger. Temple didn't notice until the bread exploded during a funeral. You file that away under things never to do unless possessed by a very bored god. Historians still argue whether the average Egyptian household owned their own grinding tools or relied on communal mills. But in your case, it's very much the former. You've been grinding your family's flour since you could sit up straight, and there's something oddly comforting about the routine. The aches are familiar, like an old friend who overstays their welcome. Halfway through the pile, your aunt wanders in. She doesn't grind, she supervises. She taps the edge of the slab with a practiced finger and pronounces the grain a little too lumpy. You suppress the urge to toss a handful of flour in her direction. She wouldn't even blink. Instead, you offer her the quern. She declines, predictably. "Remember," she says, "we don't just make bread. We make offerings. The gods don't eat clumps." She's not wrong. Bread isn't just for bellies. It's for rituals, taxes, wages, and the afterlife. A poorly made loaf can offend more than just your palate. The priest at Karnak Temple once rejected a whole batch for being suspiciously pale. You had to eat those yourself. Every last one. As you grind, you spot a flash of movement from the corner of your eye. Something small and fast. A mouse, probably. The eternal enemy of every grain store. You keep a little shrine to Bastet, goddess of cats, by the door. Mostly because your own cat has completely abdicated her duties. She's currently asleep in the sun, belly up, daring the mice to challenge her. Back to grinding. You start humming again. Something about the sun rising on fresh dough, your grandmother's old work song. The tune drifts out the window and mingles with the sounds of morning life. Somewhere, a neighbor sneezes. Someone else is sweeping the path. The Nile breezes rustle the papyrus reeds stacked in the corner, and then comes the part you dread. The handoff. You pour the ground flour into a shallow clay basin. Now, technically, it's ready to be sifted. But your grandmother's voice in your head insists, always sift twice, even if your arms fall off. She was a stickler for smooth texture. Her loaves had the softness of date cakes, and she was proud of it. Legend has it she once shamed a noblewoman into tears at a bake-off. The noblewoman had put cinnamon in her loaf. Cinnamon, like some decadent Babylonian. Of course, the real challenge now is not the sifting. It's not even the backache. It's the creeping knowledge that after all this, there's still a good chance your bread is going to turn out. Just a little too crusty. Ancient ovens are not your friend. They're temperamental, unpredictable, and possibly cursed. You'll need to watch every loaf like it's a newly hatched ibis chick. One wrong angle, one uneven coal, and the entire top crust becomes a sandstone tile. Still, you keep grinding. You keep singing. Because this is what you do. You feed a city. You nourish a god. You smooth grain into flour, flour into dough, and dough into warm, comforting shapes that somehow hold an empire together. And as you wipe your hands on your tunic and stretch your sore limbs, you allow yourself one smug thought. At least you didn't put gypsum in it. You've survived the grinding, your arms are basically noodles, and now it's time for the next act in this dusty little drama. Sieving. Yes, the noble art of trying to remove grit from flour in a place where everything, including the air, is about 40% powdered stone. You drag over the woven reed sieve, lovingly patched at least 6 times. It's not perfect, but it's yours. The pattern is tight in the middle, looser toward the edge, a design your family swears by. Of course, whether that's because it actually works or because no one can be bothered to replace it is up for debate. You settle cross-legged on the floor, holding the shallow clay bowl beneath the sieve. With one hand, you scoop the ground emmer flour into the sieve's center. With the other, you begin the gentle, circular shaking motion that sifts it. It's oddly hypnotic, this dust dance. The fine flour filters through in soft puffs, floating into the bowl like snow, while the sharp husks and larger chunks gather at the top like party crashers. The goal is simple: reduce dental injuries. The ancient Egyptian diet was notoriously gritty, not because they liked texture, but because of the sand and stone particles introduced during grinding. Teeth wore down quickly, and by middle age, most mouths looked like abandoned quarries. Ancient skulls confirm it: worn molars, chipped enamel, and jaws that told the story of a lifetime of eating bread with a side of gravel. So, you sift with reverence, with care, and, let's be honest, with a little resentment. Because no matter how well you sift, someone will still bite down on a pebble and complain. Probably that one tax collector with the delicate gums. Your cousin wanders in again, this time carrying a jar of water and a wildly exaggerated tale about a goose that attacked a priest during morning prayers. You nod along while still sieving. He offers to help, but then just sits down and starts fanning himself with a scrap of linen. "Why don't we just bake the husks into the bread?" he asks lazily. You glare at him over the sieve. I mean, isn't that what the workers at Deir el Medina do? He's not entirely wrong. Some laborers, especially the ones building tombs and hauling limestone, got what historians now call coarse bread. Basically, whatever was fastest and cheapest. If it was hot and vaguely loaf-shaped, it counted. Some of those loaves were so dense they could be used as building material in a pinch. But you have standards, even if your customers don't always notice. Even if they slather your bread in so much date syrup that it might as well be a cake, you still care. As you sift, you hum a little melody under your breath. It's a tune passed down from your mother, who got it from her mother, who may or may not have stolen it from a lute player on the docks. It's a catchy little rhythm, and somehow it helps. The flour seems to fall more smoothly with music. Then comes the quirky part, the trick your grandmother swore by, and no one else believes, the clay ball method. You reach into a basket and pull out a smooth, sun-dried ball of clay about the size of a pomegranate. With practiced ease, you roll it lightly across the top of the sieve as you shake. According to family legend, the clay attracts any lurking grit, pulling it up and away from the good flour. Scientifically, questionable. But you've done it every morning since you were old enough to reach the sieve. Historians still argue whether this technique had any real basis, or was just a placebo comfort handed down like a bread-stained heirloom. Some even suggest that certain priestly households used enchanted sieves made of copper thread for extra purity, though no such items have ever been found intact. You finish your third bowl of sifted flour and look up. Sunlight now spills fully through the doorway, highlighting the motes of flour still floating lazily in the air. Everything smells like earth and grain, dry, nutty, almost sweet. From outside, you hear a donkey braying in protest, probably upset about something deeply philosophical, like the concept of stairs. You smile to yourself. This is the rhythm of your life. Grind, sift, knead, bake, complain about geese, repeat. Your neighbor, the spice seller, stops by to gossip and maybe borrow a pinch of flour. She eyes your sieve approvingly, then drops this little nugget. They say the temple bakers use lotus-scented water when they sift, to bless the bread. You blink. Lotus water? That's fancy. And mildly absurd. Still, you make a mental note. Maybe just a drop tomorrow for curiosity's sake. As she leaves, she whispers, "And don't forget, the moon is in its quiet phase. Bake low and slow today." You nod solemnly. You have no idea what that means, but it sounds important. Now that the flour is ready, you gather it into wide, flat bowls. It's soft, golden, and fine. Well, fine-ish. A few rebellious husks remain, stubborn and unrepentant, but you tell yourself they add texture. Your grandmother would agree. You rise slowly, joints popping like old roof tiles. Your legs tingle with pins and needles from sitting too long. You shake them out, crack your knuckles, and stare down at the waiting flour. It's time. The real magic begins next. Dough. But for now, you take a moment. You lean against the warm brick wall and listen. There's the sound of water jugs being filled, a bird flapping noisily against the rafters. Your cat, still asleep, finally twitching an ear. Everything's ready. The flour is sifted. The day is rising. And somehow the bread gods haven't smited you yet. The flour is sifted. Your hands are coated in a fine golden dust, and the moment has come to summon the soul of the bread. The dough. But not just any dough. This is yeasted dough. Wild, unpredictable, and, if the stars align, deliciously soft and fragrant. Now, here's where things get a little divine. Because in ancient Egypt, yeast wasn't some tidy, packaged miracle from a store. It was alive, mysterious, and sacred. The people didn't fully understand what made it work, but they knew that if you left a flour and water mixture out in the sun for just the right amount of time, it started to bubble, rise, and breathe. Sound familiar? It should. You, my flour-dusted friend, are working with what we now call a sourdough starter, or as your great-great-grandmother would have called it, the blessed lump that smells weird. You crouch beside the wide clay jar tucked into the cool corner of your bakery, wrapped with a scrap of linen to keep flies out and blessings in. You lift the lid, and there it is, the starter, a fragrant, tangy, slightly suspicious mass of bubbling, living culture. You give it a gentle stir with a carved wooden stick that has never been washed, on purpose. Your family believes it contains the memory of good loaves, a kind of ancestral baking magic passed down with each swipe. Historians still debate exactly how much the Egyptians understood about fermentation. Did they know about microbes? Not exactly, but they knew that the right smells, the right warmth, and the right timing could turn flat dough into something magical. They even wrote hymns praising bread that rose with the morning sun. You scoop a healthy dollop of the starter into your fresh flour and add lukewarm water. Not too much, just enough to make the mixture sticky and pliable. Your hands dive in, and the dough begins to take shape beneath your fingers. It's warm. It resists you at first, clinging to your fingers like a toddler with separation anxiety. But you work it gently, coaxing it into form. You knead with your palms, folding and pressing, folding and pressing. The dough sighs, softens, begins to spring back. Outside, your cousin pretends to help by swatting flies with a palm fan and humming the wrong tune. He claims it's to keep the yeast entertained. You let it slide. For now. The truth is, this stage is oddly meditative. As you knead, the world shrinks to the feel of flour and water, the rhythm of movement, and the warm scent rising from your clay mixing bowl. It's not glamorous, but it is grounding. You wonder if Pharaoh ever kneaded his own dough. Probably not. But maybe he should have. Then comes the family secret, date syrup. Just a little. Not for sweetness, but for the yeast. It gives them a boost. You drizzle a thin line into the dough and watch it vanish as you fold again. The dough perks up immediately, almost as if it's excited. Or maybe you're projecting. Either way, it smells fantastic. At this point, you call over your younger cousin. He's good at watching. That's his only job right now, to keep an eye on the dough during its first rise, and to make sure the cat doesn't nap in it again. That was a messy morning. While the dough rests, you prepare the fermentation jars. These aren't just any old pots. They're rounded clay vessels with narrow necks, designed to trap just enough heat and moisture to keep the yeast happy. Yours are hand-me-downs, covered in faded glyphs and the occasional scribbled, "Do not touch," last time it exploded. You grease the insides lightly with sesame oil, another trick for a softer crust. Expensive, but worth it. Especially when you're trying to impress the grain scribe down the street. She has opinions about texture. As the dough rises, you pause for a moment. Sit on the low bench by the door. The breeze is warm, the sun higher now, casting slow shadows across the courtyard. You can hear your neighbor's child reciting multiplication chants, someone washing linen, and far off, a priest chanting a hymn to Hapi, god of the Nile. And you, humble baker, are playing your own quiet symphony, flour, water, air, time. Suddenly, a minor crisis. Your cousin shouts, "The dough's climbing out of the bowl!" You rush over. He's not wrong. It's puffed up magnificently, a fat, jiggling dome threatening to spill over the edge. Perfect. You grab the edges, gently punch it down with your fists, and breathe in the warm, yeasty scent. This is the moment of judgment. If the dough is too firm, the bread will dry. Too wet, and it'll collapse in the oven like a disappointed politician. But this is perfect. Springy, aromatic, just sticky enough to leave a ghost of itself on your hands. You divide the dough into balls, rolling each one with care. Some will become flat loaves, others more rounded for temple offerings. A few for the tax collectors. Those can be a little crustier, no one will notice. You set them aside for a second rise, covered with damp cloths. Your cat, sensing the rising energy, and probably the warmth, slinks closer, eyeing the dough like it owes her money. You shoo her away with a wave. She flicks her tail and returns to her favorite sunbeam, with the air of someone filing a complaint. The final step before baking, scoring. With a sharpened reed, you gently etch patterns into the top of each loaf, symbols of good fortune, fertility, or just your signature spiral. The Egyptians weren't minimalists. Even their bread wore jewelry. Your grandmother once told you that a well-scored loaf could ward off stomach demons. You're not sure if that's true, but better safe than sorry. As you stand back, hands on hips, you take in the sight. Dozens of doughy creations, resting in silence, waiting for the fire. They look peaceful, hopeful, not too crusty. Not yet. The loaves are ready. Plump, beautifully scored, and exuding that warm, sweet scent of fermenting grain and hope. Hope that today, just maybe, they'll stay soft through the bake. Because now it's time for the most dangerous, temperamental, and smoke-filled part of your daily quest. Baking. You move toward your clay oven, the domed, squat structure you've stoked into a glowing fury since dawn. It's modeled after the traditional taboon ovens, thick-walled, heat-retaining marvels of mud brick and clay. Shaped like a giant beehive and blackened from years of fire, it's your most faithful and most vengeful companion. You press a cautious palm against the outer wall. Hot. Good. You've learned to read it by feel. Too cold and the bread stays pale and spongy. Too hot and, well, remember the time your loaves came out resembling broken roof tiles? Yeah. No one in the market forgot. Inside, you've prepared the fire pit with glowing coals, and the scent of olive wood smoke lingers in the air like an old song. You use a long paddle carved from sycamore, another hand-me-down, with a split at the edge that you keep meaning to fix, but never quite do. You give each loaf one last pat for luck, then slide it into the oven. The loaves hiss faintly as they hit the hot surface. One of them sticks just slightly, but you manage to pry it free without disaster. A good omen. Now you wait. Historians still argue about the exact construction methods of these ovens. Some believe they were built into the floors of homes, others in courtyards, and some even speculate that portable versions existed for market vendors. Yours is firmly set in the back wall of your bakery, half sheltered by an awning that flaps lazily in the warm breeze. To keep the crust soft, you try an old trick passed down from a Nubian neighbor: steam. You toss a few wet reeds into a clay pot and place it near the oven's mouth. The rising vapor mingles with the baking scent, softening the air, encouraging tender, pliable crusts. Will it work? Sometimes. Maybe. Sort of. That's the thing about baking here. Consistency is a myth. You've used everything from honey glazes to beer mists to donkey breath. Not recommended, in search of the elusive, not too crusty ideal. One time, in desperation, you even tried covering loaves with damp lotus leaves. They came out smelling divine and tasting like pond. The priests were polite, but suspiciously gave their portions to the temple cats. Today, though, you're going simple. No experiments. Just good dough, a hot oven, and a hopeful heart. As the loaves begin to brown, you crouch by the fire, peering in with narrowed eyes. The surfaces begin to split in slow, dramatic fashion. One loaf puffs like it's trying to escape. Another flattens stubbornly, as if refusing to participate. Your cousin returns. He's made himself scarce since the dough started rising. He leans over your shoulder. That one's going to crack, he whispers helpfully. You grunt. I told you, he says. You should have sung the rising song before the shaping. You don't dignify that with a response. But you do quietly start humming, just in case. After about 15 minutes, though time is relative when you're baking by feel, The loaves are golden, slightly dark at the edges, and softly tapping hollow when knocked. You grab your paddle and start lifting them out, one by one. That's when the oven hisses back. You jerk your hand away. One of the loaves near the back has burst open like an irritated cobra. Steam erupts from a pocket you didn't catch during kneading. The crust has split violently, revealing its moist interior like a surprise ending in a bad scroll. You sigh. That one's going in the offering loaf pile. The gods aren't picky. Your cat saunters over and sniffs the air with calculated disinterest. She picks the loaf you're proudest of and licks it once, slowly, as if to claim it. Then walks away. Classic. Once all the loaves are out, you place them on woven mats to cool. The scent is incredible. Roasted grain, toasted edges, and that faint hint of wild yeast that always makes you feel like you've just fed something ancient. You check for doneness by tapping the bottoms. Most sound right. One is slightly overdone, crusty on top but still soft beneath. You roll it in your hands, trying to remember which customer it's for. Ah, yes, the scribe with the marble teeth. He'll love it. He always does. There's one more trick to soft loaves, though. Wrapping. You take strips of damp linen, clean, lightly scented with crushed mint, and wrap each loaf gently. The residual steam inside the bread softens the crust further as it cools. It's not foolproof, but it helps, and it smells great. Some bakers smear their cooling loaves with a honey water glaze to trap moisture. You've tried that before. It was sticky. Your cat got stuck to 3 loaves. You don't talk about it. As the loaves rest, you make a mental checklist. Half for the market, 2 for the temple, 3 for the granary scribe, and 1 for old Sekhmet down the road. She pays in onions and advice. The last time she predicted a crocodile would steal your sandal. It did, still not sure how she knew. The sky outside is blazing now, the sun hanging high like a blazing, judgmental eye. You mop your brow, sip some lukewarm barley drink, and look at your work. Some loaves are cracked, some are too dark, some, gloriously, are just right, and a few might even be soft. You allow yourself a quiet smile. Not bad for a morning's work in the hottest room in Thebes. Not bad at all. The loaves are cooling, the linen wraps are doing their softening magic, and the bakery is filled with that unmistakable scent of warm, fresh bread, earthy, slightly sweet and smoky in a comforting campfire kind of way. But your day is far from over. In fact, you're only halfway through, because now begins the eternal struggle against your most insidious enemy. Sand. You may think you understand sand. You do not. Not until you've tried to keep it out of bread. Ancient Egyptian bakers like you live in a world where sand is not just an environmental feature, it is a force of chaos. It sneaks into your flour, your mixing bowls, your cooling cloths, and somehow even the insides of loaves that never even touch the ground. Your grandmother used to say that sand was the true god of Egypt. Omnipresent, omnipotent, and just gritty enough to ruin your entire batch if you're not careful. So now, with your loaves lined up in orderly rows and wrapped like tiny edible mummies, you must begin the sacred dance of sand evasion. First, you check the airflow. You lift the woven reed curtain that separates your workspace from the street and squint outside. The breeze is gentle, but dry. Dust devils are beginning to form, little spirals of mischief spinning down the alleyways. One of them is heading straight for your doorway. You slam the curtain back down and whisper a prayer to Shu, god of air, respectfully asking him to chill. Historians still argue about how seriously ancient Egyptians regarded environmental interference in baking, but evidence from household artifacts suggests that open-air kitchens were often built with makeshift windbreaks, woven panels, stacked amphorae, or even human helpers holding mats in place. You? You have an old mat tied to a stick, wedged in the doorframe with a brick. High tech. To further combat the threat, you do what any rational baker would do. You climb onto the roof. It sounds absurd, but trust me, this is standard procedure. Up here, with a view of the winding Nile and the distant green of barley fields, you can spot a sandstorm before it strikes. You scan the horizon for the telltale brown smudge, the line between serenity and chaos. For now, all is clear. A few lazy clouds float overhead, and below your cousin is waving dramatically with a palm frond, pretending to be a pharaoh. You tell him to stop flirting with the wind. He tells you it's part of the anti-sand ritual. You tell him to go soak his tunic. Back inside, you begin the covering phase. Each loaf is transferred to a low-lidded basket woven from date palm fibers. These baskets breathe just enough to allow the bread to cool, but not enough to let in grit. You double-wrap the ones headed for temple offerings. Those priests have opinions, and a taste for bread that doesn't feel like biting into pottery. Then, you get to the strange part, the rooftop loaves. Some say that placing bread on the roof for just a few minutes, wrapped in linen and left to the mercy of the sky, seals the crust spiritually, softening it and giving it a blessed texture. Others say it's just a way to cool the bread faster. Either way, your grandmother did it, and so you do it too. You balance a tray of 3 loaves on your head and carefully climb the stone steps to the roof again. Up here, the sun is strong, but the breeze is softer. You place the loaves in their cloth nests and whisper the old chant, "Soft in spirit, soft in bite, stay warm within, stay calm in flight." Is it nonsense? Absolutely. But it sounds nice. You sit beside the loaves, looking out over Thebes. Smoke rises in slow spirals from other ovens. A distant temple bell tolls the midday mark. Farmers herd goats across the canal bridge, their laughter echoing faintly across the rooftops. Your cat joins you. How she got up here, you'll never know. She curls beside the loaves, guards them like a furry sphinx, and closes her eyes. Below, your cousin shouts something about a loose goat. You ignore him. You reach for one of the rooftop loaves, still warm, soft to the touch, fragrant. You press your fingers against the crust. It yields slightly, not too dry. You break it open slowly, steam curls upward. The crumb inside is airy, slightly irregular, and dotted with bits of barley. You tear off a piece and bite. Software not chewy. Flavorful, mildly sour, with just a hint of date sweetness. You close your eyes. This is a good loaf. You'll mark this one for the temple. The gods deserve softness too. Back downstairs, the delivery baskets are ready. You begin loading them, arranging the loaves in neat spirals with protective layers of cloth and straw. One is slightly misshapen, but you know old Sekhmet will love it anyway. She says lopsided bread keeps away evil spirits. She also says garlic in the ears prevents betrayal. You don't argue. A neighbor pokes her head in. She's heard about your loaves. She wants to barter for one. You trade it for a small pot of fig jam and a promise not to tell the scribe you gave away one of his loaves. It's a good trade. As you prepare to head out for delivery, the sand begins to pick up again. Soft whispers at first, then dry gusts tapping against your shutters like fingernails. You tighten the cloth around your bread baskets. You adjust your headscarf. You glance at the cat. She stretches and immediately goes back to sleep. It's a battle. But today, the sand hasn't won. Your loaves are soft. Your bread is strong. Your baskets are full. And not a single gust has dared to crust them over. You've survived the sand. For now. But there's another force conspiring to turn your loaves into ancient frisbees. It's not your clumsy cousin, the goose mafia, or even the oven. It's the weather. You lift your bread baskets with a practiced heave, balanced on your shoulder with a linen wrap twisted into a cushion, and step out into the Theban midday heat. The sun is high and proud, as if trying to bake a second crust onto everything it touches. And here's the thing. Heat is good for rising, great even. But once the bread is out of the oven, too much heat becomes the enemy of softness. It pulls moisture from your loaves faster than gossip spreads in the spice market. So now, you begin the delicate task of delivery timing. The bread must reach its destinations while still slightly warm, never steamy, never dry, and never, under any circumstances, after the third hour past noon. Because after that, the air turns sharp, dry, and everything starts to crust like your Uncle Hori's elbows. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptian bakers coordinated delivery times based on sun position, lunar cycles, or just vibes. Most likely, it was a combination of all three, plus whatever the local cats weren't napping on. You wind through the narrow alleyways of Thebes, sandals flapping softly against the packed dirt. Your first stop is the tax office. Yes, bread as taxes. You don't get a receipt. You don't even get a smile. But the clerk gives a small grunt of approval when you hand him a loaf wrapped in double linen and lightly dusted with barley flour. It's the same recipe your grandmother once used to pay off a fine for excessive humming during temple hours. As you turn the corner toward the granary, the wind picks up. Not strong, but dry, bone dry. It lifts the ends of your basket cloth and pokes rudely at your hard-won softness. You respond with a move known among bakers as the clutch and spin, a fluid pirouette that shields your basket and re-wraps the cloth in one dramatic sweep. Your cousin, watching from a fruit stand, gives a low whistle. You pretend not to hear him. Next stop, the Temple of Khonsu, where the priests like their loaves infused with coolness of the moon. What does that mean exactly? No one knows. So you store their bread wrapped in damp cloths and tuck it under cool amphorae during delivery. They seem pleased. At the temple gate, you pause and let the guard peek into your basket. He nods, then gestures toward the offering chamber. You tiptoe across the hot stones, your soles almost sticking, and place the loaves beside a small pile of lotus blossoms and carob pods. One of the priests thanks you in a whisper, his breath smelling faintly of fermented garlic. "Soft today?" he murmurs. You nod. He looks pleased. You count that as a small victory. But now, the worst part of the route. The western edge of the city, near the reed marshes, where the wind lives. You adjust your head wrap, tighten your grip on the basket, and march onward. The air grows hotter, heavier, until it suddenly shifts, sharp gusts funneling between buildings like whispering curses. Your cloth flaps dangerously. One loaf near the top rolls sideways. You catch it, barely. You duck into a pottery shop for shelter. The owner, old and amused, offers you a sip of tamarind water and gestures toward your basket. Too crusty yet? He asks. Not yet, you say, but the wind's working on it. He nods solemnly, as if you've just discussed politics. Outside, the gusts pass, for now. You dart back into the street and continue, dodging puddles left from yesterday's reed-soaking rituals. A dog barks from a rooftop. A child drops a fish. Life in Thebes. Your next customer is the scribal quarter, where every apprentice believes he's a food critic. You present their loaves with a flourish, offering the one you protected with sesame oil glaze. They sniff. They nod. Then one says, I detect a faint aroma of mint. You don't remember adding mint, but you say nothing. Never question a compliment in the making. From here, the deliveries get easier. A widow who pays you in lentils. A weaver who insists on the crustiest one because she uses it to remove dye stains. A spice vendor who always orders an extra loaf for raw. But you're pretty sure it's for her parrot. By the time you return to your bakery, the sun is lower, casting long shadows across the stone steps. You unload the empty baskets with aching shoulders and dry lips. Inside, the air is cooler. The fire has burned down. The cat is now sleeping directly inside your flour sack. Again. You sit. You sip water. You breathe. And then, with quiet satisfaction, you unwrap one last reserve loaf, hidden from the sand, spared from the heat, untouched by geese. It's soft, still soft. You tear it in half and smile. Victory. You've paid your taxes in bread, appeased the temple with moon-cooled loaves, and danced with the desert wind to keep your crusts intact. But now comes a different kind of challenge, the accounting. Because in ancient Egypt, bread isn't just breakfast, it's a currency. You retie your tunic sash, dust the flour from your arms, and step back out into the street, carrying a fresh set of baskets. This time, they aren't for offerings or sales. These loaves are counted, recorded, and inspected by men with styluses sharp enough to draw blood and egos to match. First stop, the local granary office. It's a low, rectangular building near the edge of the administrative quarter, where scribes sit cross-legged on woven mats, hunched over clay tablets, their fingers stained with ink and date juice. You've been here 100 times, and still the scent of reed pens and musty barley makes your stomach twist. Not from nerves, just from the knowledge that you're about to be judged by someone who's never baked a loaf in his life. You greet the clerk at the door. He doesn't look up. You present your bread tally slip, a smudged scrap of papyrus tied with string. He takes it, squints, then gestures toward the weighing station without saying a word. Classic bureaucracy. You kneel by the low table and begin the process. One loaf at a time, placed on a hanging scale, balanced with rough stones and barley weights. The scribe grunts approvingly at the first 3. But the 4th? He frowns. This one looks swollen. You raise an eyebrow. That's called rising. It's good. He sniffs. Looks suspicious. You're not sure what he suspects. A yeast conspiracy? Regardless, you offer to swap it for another. He waves you on. The bread passes inspection, if barely. Historians still debate how formalized these systems were. Some believe bread was logged down to the last crumb, while others suggest many transactions were based on trust and familiarity. But here, in this office, everything is counted. Even the loaves delivered to workers building the nearby tombs are carefully measured, noted, and stamped. Speaking of which, you're headed now to the construction foreman's hut near the edge of town. Workers there are paid daily, not with coins, but with ration loaves. Hardier than your market offerings, these are dense, round, and designed to last in the sun. They're made with coarser flour and extra salt to prevent spoilage. Less soft, perhaps, but dependable. You drop off 2 baskets and receive a stamped clay token in return, proof of delivery. You add it to the pouch tied at your hip. These tokens are your day's true payment. Enough of them, and you can trade for oil, fish, or even a new pair of sandals. Yours are definitely past their prime. The goosebite marks don't help. On your way back, you swing by the estate manager's villa, a mud brick complex surrounded by palm trees and guarded by a doorman with one eyebrow perpetually raised. You hand over 3 loaves wrapped in mint-dampened cloth. These are your finest. A gift. Or rather a bribe. The estate manager controls grain allotments. If he likes your bread, you get the good wheat next month. Less grit. Fewer husks. Fewer complaints from priests with delicate digestion. Inside, the manager nibbles one corner delicately, chews, pauses, then, miraculously, smiles. You say nothing. Just bow and back away slowly, like a priest leaving a lion enclosure. By now, your pouch clinks with tokens, and your arms ache from basket hauling. But there's one last stop. The grain scribe. He's a sharp man with a sharper tongue and an obsession with precise documentation. His scrolls stretch across 3 stone shelves. He knows how many loaves you delivered last month, what size they were, and how many had burnt bottoms. He's also fond of riddles. Today, as you arrive, he greets you with, "What has no mouth, but feeds many?" You sigh. "A loaf." He chuckles. "A clever baker. Come, let's inspect." You open the basket. He lifts one loaf, examines its bottom, sniffs the crust, then breaks it with a satisfying snap. Steam curls up. He nods, makes a few notes, and hands you a palm-frond slip bearing your monthly record tally. "Good moisture," he says, a bit pale on one edge. It was hiding from the sun. He grins. "Smart loaf." You head home with a lighter basket and a full token pouch. The street is quieter now. Shadows stretch long across the baked earth. A dog snoozes beside a merchant's stall. Your cousin is attempting to balance a jug on his head while reciting a love poem to a tomato. You pass him. "Bread day going well?" he asks, grinning. You pat your pouch. "Not too crusty." Back in your bakery, you untie your sandals, stretch your aching back, and begin counting your clay tokens. Each one is a small victory. Proof that your bread was accepted, appreciated, and, most importantly, not rejected for being suspiciously risen. Outside, the breeze carries the scent of evening cook fires and roasting onions. Inside, your cat has claimed the flour sack again. And in your hands, you hold the proof that today your bread made the rounds, paid the wages, soothed the priests, and, despite all odds, stayed soft. The sun is lowering now, painting the Theban skyline with streaks of burnt orange and dusty pink. You've paid the taxes, filled the temple shelves, and earned enough clay tokens to consider splurging on a bundle of leeks. Life is good, but not perfect. Because now comes an unsettling truth. Not all bread survives the day. You sit on your low stool, back aching, knees dusty, and open one of your storage baskets. It was packed this morning, tightly wrapped and double-lined. Yet one of the loaves near the bottom feels wrong. You lift it gently, unwrap the linen, and recoil, just slightly. A faint hint of sourness tickles your nose. And the crust? Oddly slick. You press a cautious finger into it. It jiggles. Bread is not supposed to jiggle. This, my weary friend, is a spoiled loaf. A victim of the Nile's humidity, your cousin's questionable stacking skills, or simply the eternal mystery of fermentation gone rogue. Historians still debate the frequency and causes of ancient Egyptian food spoilage. While the arid climate helped preserve grains and dried goods, it was precisely this combination of heat and moisture, especially near the river, that turned bread into a swampy science experiment when not properly cooled. You sniff again. There's a sharp edge to the aroma, not unlike sour beer. Some would say that's normal. Others would call it cursed. You call it a loss. Except, it's not entirely useless. You recall a trick from your grandmother. When bread went wrong, when it turned blue-green or sticky or developed what she ominously called the veil, she didn't throw it out. No, she turned it into bread cheese. Stay with me. The process is simple and slightly alarming. You tear the spoiled bread into pieces, soak it in goat's milk or watered beer, let it ferment further in a sealed jar, then drain and press the mush into a soft, sour spread. Does it taste good? Not exactly. Does it last? Miraculously, yes. Some scribes claim Pharaoh Akhenaten was fond of it, though others suspect that was slander. Either way, you now have a jar of future something. You set it aside and light a bit of dried myrrh, just in case it's attracting spirits. Your cat sniffs it once and walks away offended. Another option? Feeding it to the animals. You break a slightly moldy heel off one of the reject loaves and toss it toward your neighbor's goat. It sniffs, chews, pauses, and then bleats indignantly. Message received. You set the other questionable loaf aside for a more daring animal, maybe the local donkey who once ate half a reed basket and looked pleased about it. Not all spoilage is visible, though. Sometimes a loaf seems fine but smells off. A trace of sulfur, a whisper of dampness. Your grandmother used to say that ghosts sometimes touch the bread, left a mark on it invisible to the eye but obvious to the nose. So you start inspecting all the leftovers one by one. You check the bottoms for sogginess. You tap the crusts. You break one open and there it is. A pale blue vein, delicate and thread-like, curling through the crumb like a river delta. Bread mold, soft where cold to the touch. Almost elegant. If you weren't a baker, you might call it beautiful. There are stories, whispered late at night, about people who ate moldy bread and claimed they saw visions. Gods, floods, talking cats. You're skeptical. But once, your uncle ate a spoiled honey loaf and tried to marry a tree, so you never say never. You burn the bluest one, just to be safe. And now you remember another of your grandmother's old methods, the bread check ritual. You light a small clay lamp, place a suspect loaf beside it, and sprinkle powdered cumin and salt in a circle. If the loaf cracks or hisses, it's unclean. If it sits quietly, it's safe. You try it now, just for fun. The loaf does nothing. You nod solemnly and feed it to your cousin. He takes a bite, pauses, and says, "Tastes like regret." So, yes, it's spoiled. But you make a note he's still standing, at least for now. Some loaves, however, survive the day and beyond. You store those in the cooling alcove near the back wall, layered in reed mats and covered with dry cloths. They'll last another day, maybe two, if the gods are in a good mood and the weather stays mild. Tomorrow, you'll toast them, or fry them with onions, or crumble them into soup. But the spoiled ones? They get repurposed, or honored, Or buried. Yes, buried. Your grandmother insisted that truly foul loaves, those turned by time, by heat, or by curse, should be wrapped in fresh linen and buried at the base of the neem tree near the well. Return it to the earth, she'd say, or it returns to you. You've followed that advice every time since the incident with the black loaf and the mysterious whispering. So, under the soft evening light, you gather 2 fully spoiled loaves in a basket, wrap them gently, and carry them down the side path to the neem tree. The soil is loose, the ground still warm. You dig a shallow hole, place the loaves inside, and whisper a simple chant. Bread to body, crust to dust, return in peace, and do not fuss. Then you cover it up and step back. The neem tree rustles slightly, like it approves. Back at the bakery, the air is lighter. The spoiled loaves are gone. The good ones are stacked neatly, and in the corner, your goat-chewed paddle leans against the wall like a retired sword. You sit once more. Spoilage is part of life. A reminder that even in a world run by bread, not every loaf makes it. But tomorrow? Tomorrow, you'll try again. Night deepens in Thebes. The heat of the day has faded into a slow, gentle warmth that hugs your skin instead of roasting it. A few lanterns flicker along the alleyways. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then gives up. You're sitting beside your oven now, barefoot, relaxed, and just a little watchful. Because tonight, you're baking bread for the dead. Yes, you heard that right. Even in death, no one escapes bread in Egypt. In fact, they might eat more of it than they ever did in life. You lean over your low prep table and begin shaping the offering loaves. These aren't your market-ready, scribe-inspected, priest-approved specials. These are symbolic, ritualistic, sometimes even slightly burnt on purpose. The dead, after all, don't mind a little crispiness. These loaves are destined for tomb altars and family shrines. Placed beside bowls of lentils and dried dates, they nourish ancestors, please the gods, and, allegedly, keep ghosts from popping up during dinner. And let's just say, if you've ever been haunted by a hangry great-aunt, you'd take this tradition very seriously. You shape the first dough ball carefully, pressing it into a fish form. Not a realistic fish, mind you, more of a fish impression. One fin, one eye, vaguely aquatic, symbolic, not culinary. This one is for your uncle's shrine. He was a fisherman, fond of puns, and claimed he once outswam a crocodile. Everyone believed him. Mostly because he still had all his limbs. You set the fish loaf aside and begin on the next. A cone-shaped offering, smooth and compact, meant for a friend's family tomb. This one will be left near the western necropolis tomorrow morning. It's an act of remembrance, not nutrition, but you still bake it with care. Historians still argue whether tomb offerings were ever meant to be eaten later by priests, servants, or opportunistic passers-by. Some loaves show bite marks, others remain untouched for centuries. But regardless of what happened to them after, the intent was spiritual. Bread as connection, as comfort, as currency for the afterlife. You glance at your cousin, who's wrapping the finished loaves in linen and stuffing herbs, marjoram, thyme, crushed mint, between the folds. This isn't about flavor, it's about symbolism. Fresh herbs, fragrant bread, gentle whispers for the dead. You think they really eat it? He asks, adjusting a particularly squishy loaf. You shrug. I think they notice when we don't. He nods solemnly. Like when you forgot Grandpa last year and the goat broke its leg. That was just a coincidence. Was it? You don't answer. Once the loaves are ready, you place them in a shallow basket lined with reeds. These will rest overnight in the cool storage niche before being delivered in the morning. Some will go to tombs, others to household shrines, small nooks carved into walls or tucked behind curtains, where families light incense and murmur greetings to the past. You glance toward your own little shrine, tucked beside the flower jars. The carved wooden statue of your grandmother sits cross-legged, holding a tiny loaf carved from limestone. Her expression is eternally unimpressed. You walk over, bow your head slightly, and offer her a fresh loaf. It's still warm, not too crusty. "You'd have baked it better," you whisper. "But I'm trying." You swear the shadows around her statue shift just a little. A nod, a shrug. Probably just the candle flickering. Probably. Then comes the more serious offering. Burnt bread. Yes, burnt, intentionally. One small loaf, flattened and overbaked until the edges blacken. It's called a charbread, and it's meant for appeasing angry spirits, misunderstood gods, or just the occasional unsettled cousin who died during a dice game and is still holding a grudge. You place the charbread on a clay plate, whisper an apology to any watching ancestors, and set it near the courtyard wall. The wind catches the scent, bitter and rich, not unpleasant, and carries it into the night. Your cousin pokes his head out the window. The neighbors are going to think you burned the batch again. You grin. Let them wonder. He grins back. Then you both freeze. A low growl from the alley. You peek through the curtain. A jackal, mangy, narrow-eyed, padding past with purpose. It pauses at the wall, sniffs the charbread once, then continues down the street like it owns Thebes. You exchange glances. "Anubis approves," your cousin whispers, "or he's on a carb-free diet." Either way, it's a sign. You head back inside and begin cleaning the tools, scraping the dough bowls, rinsing the reed wrappings, brushing the flour from the floor. Your cat supervises with half-lidded eyes, tail twitching every few seconds as if deciding whether to judge you. The last task of the night is the ghost crust check. You walk slowly through the bakery, tapping each surface, checking for stray crumbs or loaves left unwrapped. If a ghost were to visit, curious, hungry, slightly passive-aggressive, they should find your offerings fresh, respectful, and free of extra sand. And if they do eat something, that's fine. You'll know by morning. A missing loaf, an odd draft, a footprint in flour. It's part of the job. You blow out the final lantern. Darkness settles. The loaves are wrapped, the dead are fed, and for tonight at least, your ancestors sleep with full bellies. Dawn again. The sky bruises from indigo to pink, and the Nile glints like polished copper beyond the rooftops. You've slept for a few hours, curled in a quiet corner on a sack of barley, your cat draped over your ankle like a judgmental leg warmer. The first light doesn't wake you. The crash outside your door does. You jolt upright. Your cousin barrels in, half breathless, half excited, holding what appears to be a partially mangled loaf. "A crocodile stole from the bakery." You blink. He holds out the evidence, one of yesterday's charbreads, teeth marks along one side, moist with something that is definitely not river water. You take it carefully, hold it at arm's length, and sniff. Yep, that's a Nile thief's calling card. "It was by the canal," he says, grinning. I saw it myself. Big thing, like a log with teeth. Just picked it up and waddled off. You sit slowly on your stool, still holding the soggy, blessedly half-eaten loaf. The cat jumps down and sniffs it once before making a sound of sheer disgust and trotting off. You knew this day would come. The crocodile theft has been whispered about for years, an old legend among bakers along the floodplain. But now it's real, and it's eaten your offering loaf. You whisper a small prayer to Sobek, the crocodile god, just in case he's offended, or flattered, or both. Historians still argue about the role of Sobek in daily Egyptian life. Some saw him as protective, others as dangerously unpredictable. Either way, if your bread ends up in his mouth, you're likely to receive attention, divine or otherwise. You glance outside, and sure enough, there's a trail. Slight, but unmistakable. Wet, wide, tail swished in the dirt. You follow it, down the alley, past the reed baskets, along the crumbling canal edge, where the water hisses softly and dragonflies dart like jeweled messengers. There, right at the bank, sits a half-chewed loaf. Yours. Floating gently, like it's still trying to be useful. You crouch, scoop it up, and realize it's the one shaped like a fish. For your uncle. You sigh. Of course it was. Your cousin appears beside you, breathless again. Do you think we should file a complaint? To whom? You ask. He considers. The temple? You both picture the high priest's face if you tried to file a divine lawsuit against a crocodile. You both decide not to. Still, the incident must be addressed. Back at the bakery, you do what your grandmother always said to do in uncertain times. Make a special loaf. You blend the flour with crushed fennel and black cumin, a combination meant to soothe digestive gods and dangerous animals. You shape it into a spiral, like a coiled crocodile tail, and sprinkle the top with a few pinches of crushed limestone dust. Symbolic. Probably not edible. Then you float it downstream, slowly, with a whisper. No hard feelings. You feel slightly ridiculous, but also oddly peaceful. Your cousin adds, tell him not to come back. Don't tempt him. You return to your bakery and begin cleanup, but word of the crocodile spreads fast. Within an hour, 3 neighbors stop by, just to check in. One brings a bundle of dried figs as a peace offering to Sobek. Another, a jar of beer. The third, she brings a contract. You blink. What's this? She clears her throat. A liability agreement, should your bakery attract more divine animals and damage nearby property. You sign, just in case. The truth is, Egypt is full of stories like these. Tales of animals becoming litigants, defendants, even priests in their own right. Cats were mummified, geese were sacred, bulls were literally treated as gods. And crocodiles? Well, they were always wild cards. One day, a threat. The next, a symbol of power. You sit again by the oven, chewing on a leftover crust. Not the soggy one, obviously, and watch the street outside come alive. A woman walks by with a baby swaddled in linen. 2 boys chase a goat carrying someone's sandal. You smile. Could be worse. And then you see him. At the far end of the alley, a glint of wet scale, a flick of tail, the crocodile, smallish, maybe 5 feet long, definitely not full grown. You freeze. He pauses, looks at you, or possibly at the breadbasket beside you. And then, as casually as a duck at a garden party, he turns and slips into a drainage channel. Gone. You stare at the empty alley. Your cousin leans over your shoulder. Do you think he'll tell his friends? You groan. That afternoon, just to be safe, you carve a small tablet with the words, "Bread is for the living. Offerings available upon polite request." You place it by the door. The cat curls up beside it. You return to your loaves, to your flour, to your simple daily rhythm. But from now on, you keep one eye on the canal, because you never know who or what might show up for a snack. After the crocodile incident, you could probably use a quiet day. But there's no such thing when you're a baker in Thebes, especially when the festival of Bastard is approaching, which means it's time to dust off your finest aprons, warm up the oven, and begin preparing ceremonial bread. Not just for eating, but for dancing, gifting, dressing up, and, in at least one case, wearing eyeliner. Yes, we'll get there. You wake before the sun, slipping past your sleeping cousin and the cat, who has somehow stolen your sleeping mat again, and you light the oven fire in reverent silence. Because festival bread is different. It's not just about nourishment, it's about pageantry, symbol, celebration, drama. And drama, dear friend, requires shapes. You begin by mixing dough as usual, coarse emmer flour, water, a bit of leftover starter that's been fermenting just long enough to smell interesting. But instead of shaping into rounds or flats, you divide it and start molding. First up, the lotus loaf. Shaped like a blooming flower, each petal pulled and pinched just so. It's meant to represent rebirth and divine beauty, but it also looks incredibly stylish in a bread basket. You make 5 of them. 1 for your shrine, 2 for the street dancers, and 2 for your aunt, who will absolutely claim she invented them. Next, the ankh loaf, your personal favorite, a bit trickier, since the loop must hold without collapsing in the oven. You need extra hard for those, whispering encouragements to the dough like, "Don't puff too hard," and "You were born to rise." Then comes the real showstopper, the cat loaf. It's a round, dense base with little ears poking up, tiny paws folded beneath, and 2 black sesame seeds for eyes. Your grandmother swore Bastet herself once appeared in a dream to compliment her cat loaves. That same night, a goose laid an egg on the roof. Coincidence? Maybe. Still, you don't take chances. Historians still puzzle over the full extent of bread artistry in ancient Egypt. While flat and round loaves dominate archaeological findings, illustrations and tomb carvings suggest far more elaborate forms existed for special occasions, animals, deities, even pharaoh busts, though the ones with crowns were notoriously difficult to balance. You take your time with the details. A few loaves are brushed with date syrup glaze, which gives them a rich golden sheen. Others are stuffed, a little onion here, a dab of cheese there, maybe a handful of crushed figs if you're feeling fancy. Each batch is layered with its own rhythm and intention. And then, because you are nothing if not traditional, you reach for the coal pot. Yes. The eyeliner. You dip a thin reed into the mix, crushed galena, oil, and a bit of beeswax, and gently dot the eyes of the cat loaves. It's absurd. It's delightful. It's something your grandmother used to insist on. If the bread sees, she'd say, it finds its way. You finish them all with a nod and set them to rise. Your cousin wanders in, rubbing his eyes. Are those loaves judging me? You glance at the cat loaves. They are, in fact, doing a remarkable job of looking smug. Maybe, you reply. You did eat all the date jam yesterday. He backs out slowly. By mid-morning, the neighborhood is already humming with festival energy. Musicians tuning their lyres, girls weaving flower crowns, someone dragging a cart of papyrus masks past your doorway. You prepare a tray of bread samples for the procession, miniature versions of your fancier loaves, meant to be handed out with smiles and occasionally thrown like soft missiles during dances. As you step outside with your tray, you're nearly bowled over by a group of young boys in leopard print tunics, shrieking with laughter as they pretend to be temple cats. You hold the tray overhead, dodging wildly, and miraculously avoid disaster. You make your way to the square, where a makeshift altar to Bastet is surrounded by fragrant offerings, baskets of catnip, pots of honey, and of course, pyramids of bread. One particularly ambitious baker has built a scale model of the Temple of Karnak entirely out of spelt rolls. It's impressive, if structurally unsound. Your bread is placed with care, cat loaves in front, lotus loaves flanking either side, ankh loaves forming a protective ring. The crowd murmurs approvingly. Then, the music starts. And here's the thing about the Festival of Bastet. It's not solemn, it's not stiff. It's joyful, wild, playful. The goddess herself, after all, represents pleasure, music, protection, and the occasional well-timed claw swipe. People begin dancing in loose circles. Someone's thrown on a lion mask. You spot a woman juggling onions. A little girl runs by offering honey cakes to strangers. One of your cat loaves gets gently lifted onto a ceremonial tray and paraded around the square like royalty. You could not be prouder. Your cousin appears, eyes wide. A goose is doing a headstand near the beer tent. You nod. Bastet is pleased. You spend the afternoon distributing bread, receiving compliments, dodging over-enthusiastic dancers, and once awkwardly explaining to a very confused merchant why one loaf has eyelashes. By sunset, your tray is empty, your face is sore from smiling, and your feet are full of flour. Back at the bakery, the oven is still warm, the cat loaves gone, and the coal reed is drying beside the mixing bowl. You sit on your stool, lean your head back, and sigh. Festivals are chaotic, beautiful, exhausting. But for just a moment, in the fading golden light, you feel something soft brush your cheek, a breeze, a whisper, a presence. Bastet? Maybe, or maybe just flour. Still, you whisper a thank you and promise to keep making loaves that see. After the chaos of Bastet's festival, the music, the dancing, the eyelinered bread, you'd think things would slow down. Maybe a quiet morning, a few simple loaves, a nap. But no. Today, you've received a commission from the palace kitchens, which means, for the next several hours, you will be baking for the pharaoh's table. You stand still for a moment, flour on your hands, mentally preparing. This is no ordinary bake. No wonky crusts, no lazy rises, no amusingly lopsided cat loaves allowed. These are loaves that must be worthy of gold plates and ivory trays, served beside roast goose and spiced figs to people wearing more makeup than most statues. You glance at your cousin. He has already tripped over a basket and is now trying to convince your cat to model a bread crown. This will be a long day. You begin with the flour, not your everyday emmer. Today, you're using the good stuff. White barley, sifted 6 times, silky and fine, nearly glowing in the morning light. Your grandmother kept a jar for special occasions. The kind of flour you use, she'd say, when someone important might be judging your kneading arms. You mix it with warm water, a hint of wild honey, and just a touch of milk, because royalty, apparently, is not above extra fluffiness. Then your secret weapon, beer steam. Yes, you heard right. It's an old method, only used for elite loaves. You take a bit of barley beer, Heat it gently until the foam rises, and then you pour just the steam, not the liquid, over the dough as it rests. Somehow it softens the texture, making the crumb tender and the crust gleam like polished limestone. Historians still argue whether this was standard practice or just eccentric baker gossip passed down from palace to palace. But your great-uncle once swore a loaf he made this way got him out of military duty. So, you keep doing it. While the dough rests, you shape the loaves. Today's request is for sun discs, papyrus fans, and something described as like a palm tree, but edible. You start with the sun discs, round, smooth, pressed slightly flat, brushed with a mix of sesame and oil for that golden glow. Then the fans, made by layering thin strips of dough in a spiral, folding them like you're tucking secrets into a scroll. Finally, the palm tree. Okay, you try. You stack 2 little balls for coconuts, a triangle of dough for the base, and 5 slits for leaves. It looks interpretive. Your cousin leans in. Looks like an angry hedgehog. You hand him a spoon and tell him to go stir the beer. He takes this as an honor. Then comes the decoration. You use a fine-tipped reed to etch symbols into the surface of each loaf. A sun ray, a lotus flower, an eye, a beetle. Each one meant to convey blessings, power, and above all, tasteful opulence. You finish with a dab of fig glaze, because if a pharaoh's bread doesn't glisten in the light, did it even happen? The palace courier arrives just before noon. He's tall, silent, wearing enough gold to fund a minor military campaign. He eyes your basket with the caution of someone who once saw a loaf that looked too enthusiastic and never trusted bread again. You uncover the loaves slowly, one by one, like unveiling sacred scrolls. He nods. Once. You've passed. The loaves are loaded onto a reed-lined tray, covered in perfumed linen, and carried away by 2 assistants with arms like river gods. You exhale, and then immediately collapse onto your flour sack. Did he say thank you? Your cousin asks. No. Did he wink? Not even close. Still, the kitchen boy who helped carry the tray slipped you something before they left. A bronze ring with a tiny wheat symbol carved into it. Not palace jewelry, just a token. But it means someone in that kitchen appreciated your work. And that's enough. You stretch your legs, toes curling against the cool mud brick floor, and let yourself rest for a moment. That's when your aunt bursts in, waving a piece of papyrus. It's from the palace, she gasps. You sit up. She reads. His Majesty requests a second batch for tomorrow. Additional shape. Nile fish. Texture, cloud-like. Glaze, optional, but suggested. You stare into the middle distance. Your cousin leans over. Did they say cloud-like? What does that even mean? You have no idea, but you know you'll try. Because baking for royalty is like dancing with crocodiles. You never quite know if you're being praised or sized up for dinner. You begin mixing the next batch. This time you whisper a quiet spell for softness. Not just for the crust, but for your own sanity. You rise early, again. The palace loaves were well received. Your fish-shaped effort earned a confused head tilt and a polite cough from the kitchen steward, which counts as wild praise in those circles. But now it's time to return to your real people, the ones who don't demand cloud-like crumb or interpretive bread art. Today, you're baking for the villagers, not scribes, not priests, not gold-bangle couriers, just farmers, reed weavers, linen spinners, and the boy who sells broken pottery he insists is antique. They don't care if a loaf sparkles. They care if it's warm, filling, and doesn't chip a tooth. You start by hauling your coarsest grain, the mix your cousin jokingly calls chewable dust. This is the bread of the people, the crumbly, crusted, grit-laced, teeth-testing loaves that are half meal, half exfoliation. You sift it once. That's generous. Then you kneel at the grindstone, back and forth, scrape and pull. It's slower than usual. Your arms are tired from yesterday's royal ballet of glazes and symbols. But there's something comforting about the rhythm, the weight, the roughness. This is the kind of flour you grew up on, the one that tastes like soil and sunshine and hard work, and sometimes the inside of a storage amphora. You mix it with plain water, add the old starter, and leave it in the sun just long enough to puff. No fig glaze, no sesame oil, just flour, water, and a small whispered joke to the dough. Let's try not to break anyone's molars today. The first batch is flatbread, quick, hot, and satisfying. You slap dough balls onto the hot clay oven wall with a thunk. They hiss, they puff slightly. One slides off too soon. You catch it with your elbow. The cat claps from the doorway. Rude. You lay them to cool on a cloth, stacking them with dried onion layers between for added flavor. Then come the griddle cakes, made in a shallow pan over coals. These are for the older folk, whose teeth have seen better days. You soften the dough with goat milk and mash in some lentils. The result is dense but forgiving, like a firm pillow with opinions. Your cousin shows up halfway through, flour already in his eyebrows. "You're doing the softish ones?" he asks. You nod. He grins. "Auntie Tani will be thrilled. Last time she said your bread was like eating regret." You sigh. She eats with her opinions first. You start shaping the last batch, kid loaves. These are small, sweetened with date paste, and stamped with symbols. Little fish, birds, sun rays. Not fancy, not elegant, just playful. The kind of thing a child can carry in their satchel and nibble on between chores and mischief. Historians often overlook the everyday breads of Egypt. Tomb murals show the grand feasts, the ceremonial offerings, the perfect loaves stacked like prizes. But this crusty, cracked, chewy bread is what really fed the nation. You bake it with care. You know who will eat each one. That oval-shaped flatbread? That's for the potter with the missing tooth, who dips it in garlic oil and tells wild stories about talking statues. The crumblier griddle cake? For the reed cutter with 6 children and a tendency to pay in bundles of fish string. The kid loaf shaped like a sun? That's for Tepa, the shy girl who feeds the village cats and once mistook a tortoise for a god. When the loaves are cool, you pack them into wide reed baskets, layering soft leaves between the stacks. The smell is incredible, earthy, rich, with hints of smoke, grain, and faint sweetness. You and your cousin load the baskets onto a borrowed donkey. He immediately eats one of the loaves. You glare. He chews. Quality control. You set off through the winding village lanes, the sun now casting long shadows, the scent of onions and cooking oil wafting from open courtyards. Your first stop is Auntie Tani. She opens the door, arms crossed. "I hope today's loaf doesn't insult my jaw." You hand her a griddle cake, still warm. She bites, chews, pauses. "This one's softer." "Only slightly." "I accept your effort." She hands you a jar of pickled radishes and closes the door. You mark that as a win. You stop by the basket weaver's. He gives you papyrus string in return. The reed cutter gives you smoked fish and a lopsided smile. One boy offers you a clay frog figurine and says, "This is for the bread that didn't fight back." Every gift, every trade, is part of a network older than coin, older than ink, older than complaint scrolls to the temple. Bread moves through the village like a currency of care. You return to the bakery as the sun dips behind the palms. The baskets are light. Your pouch is heavy with tokens, trinkets, and bartered goods. The oven glows faintly. The cat is asleep on the leftover grain sack. Your cousin is trying to invent a dance called the sift. You sit quietly. You remember that royal bread may get all the poetry, but it's the village bread, crusty, uneven, flawed, and real, that keeps the world turning. The day draws to a close. The light fades from honey gold to soft ash, and the air carries the scent of cooling stone, distant river water, and the faintest trace of toasted flour. Inside the bakery, all is quiet. It's time now for one final task, an act of tradition, tenderness, and a little superstition. Tonight, you will bake a funerary loaf. Not for anyone in particular, not for a recent death, just as a precaution, an offering, a promise. Something every baker in Thebes does now and then, like lighting a candle or tossing salt over a shoulder. Because in this land, where life clings tightly to the banks of the Nile and the afterlife begins just beyond the western hills, you don't wait for grief to knock. You prepare bread for the journey in advance. You begin with the oldest flour in your jars, the grain your grandmother set aside from a harvest blessed by particularly fat geese. You mix it with pure water and a splash of sweet beer. The dough is thick, almost solemn under your hands. You knead slowly. This is not bread for sale, not for flavor, not for pleasure. It's for memory, for continuity, for reassurance. Your cousin watches in silence. Even he knows this is serious. You shape the dough into a long, flat oval, like a bark, the kind carved into tomb walls, floating on painted waves. You press a line of crushed coriander down the center, symbolizing the passage across the river. Then, with a reed stylus, you inscribe a simple wish: safe travel, soft steps, warm hearth. Historians have found loaves buried beside mummies, tucked into tomb niches, depicted on offering tables in reliefs older than memory. Some even survived millennia, fossilized bread, crumbling but still unmistakably made by human hands. It seems even in death, a good baker's work lingers. You place the funerary loaf on a low clay tray, wrap it in woven palm leaves, and set it on your shrine. Not for your grandmother, she's had her share, but for whoever might need it next. A stranger, a neighbor, a god in passing, or even someday yourself. You sit for a while, watching the lamp flame flicker over the smooth crust. Then slowly, the rhythm of the day fades. Your cousin dozes in the corner, his mouth slightly open, clutching a broken bread stamp like it's a treasure. The cat is curled in her flour sack nest. The oven is cool, and the wind outside is quiet, just as it should be. You rise and sweep the last of the flour from the floor, humming softly. You extinguish the lamp, and you whisper to the night, "Let this be enough." The warmth of the day has long since slipped away, and now only the softness of night remains. You ease back onto your mat, your body tired, but your spirit calm. The scent of flour still clings to your tunic, like a gentle echo of all the loaves shaped and shared and saved. Outside, The Nile flows steadily in the dark, unseen, but always there. The wind carries coolness across the rooftops, rustling the palms with a hush that sounds like distant breath. Even the stars seem quieter now, blinking slowly, sleepily above. You listen to the quiet creak of your shutters, the low snore of your cousin, the soft shifting of your cat as she turns in her sleep, and you feel the stillness settle over you, like linen laid gently across your shoulders. The bread is baked, the offerings made, the baskets emptied, and for tonight, no sandstorms, no crocodiles, no scribes demanding cloud-like textures, just peace. You picture your last loaf, inscribed, wrapped, waiting on the shrine, not as an end, but as a beginning. A loaf to cross the water, a loaf to light the way. You close your eyes, knowing you've done what bakers have done for thousands of years. Fed the living, honored the dead, and woven another warm thread into the fabric of the day. Sleep comes easy now, soft, slow, silent, just like a perfect loaf cooling in the dark.